This year's Millionaire Lottery offers 10 incredible grand prize options, including 9 homes, 2.7 million tax-free cash. Get your tickets, millionairelottery.com. Joining us now, our Monday regular NHL insider from the Bob McCown podcast, former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, Mr. John Shannon. How you doing?
I'm great. I spent the weekend in Cleveland, guys. I was there. I tell you what, it was a good learning experience. I got invited by the guys at Fox to go and be behind the scenes with their broadcast of the Tampa Bay Browns game.
Oh,
and it was, boy, oh boy, I wish we could do things that way in our country. Oh my goodness. It was spectacular.
Every game is a Grey Cup, right? Every game's a Grey Cup in terms of cameras and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the preparation and the attention to detail. Now you know why NFL football gets such tender, loving care. Their production meeting on Saturday night, which I got invited to, was basically 4 hours long, and it was. It was friendly. It was organized chaos, and at the end of it, everybody came out of the meeting on the same page with the same plan. It was brilliant. Great leadership, great creativity, attention to detail is just spectacular. Anyway, I couldn't talk enough about it. I was on cloud nine leaving the building yesterday, just not for the overtime victory by the Browns, because I'm not a Browns fan, but just because now you see why these guys do such a good job.
Who was the crew? Who was the broadcast?
Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma.
Right.
And great chemistry. Work hard together. And here's the amazing thing, and this is not a note at any of the things that I've ever worked on. They really like each other. They really have a good time. You know, and I think we did too, and I think we always had a good time and we really liked each other, but this was remarkable. This was really impressive.
And of course, Kenny calls a whole bunch of hockey as well.
Well, and that's how I got. I mean, Kenny and I have been friends. Kenny was a stats guy for me when I was producing Canucks or Oilers or Jets or Flames or Leafs on Long Island. Kenny was the stats guy for television way back when. So.
And oddly, also a Vancouver Canucks fan. He's told us many times over the years. For some reason, he took a shining to the Canucks as a young guy.
Because of the sweaters. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. All right. Now, Mr. Shannon, please bow from the waist deeply, arms flared to the side with regards to the Vancouver Canucks, and it's still early.
For what?
Preaching.
For what?
He's been preaching early the entire time.
Listen. When you lose, say little. When you win, you say less.
Can you talk to John Herdman about that, please?
Actually, that's another story for another day. Well, we could have a huge one about that too. You know what? Just it's a long season, guys. You know, patience is a virtue, and I know I've known Jimmy Rutherford long enough to know how patient he can be, and despite what has happened with all those radio interviews and press conference things, Jimmy's a patient guy underneath, and he just wants to win badly, and I think it's going to happen. So,
but not this season, John. Like, they're not going to win this season.
Why not? I mean,
are you talking playoffs, or what are you talking here? Playoffs, or?
Oh, I think they'll get to the playoffs. Yeah, I do. I really do. There's no reason not to think that.
Well, just the teams generally in this position this far back, and even at this point in the season, you know, mathematically, they generally don't, John. Like you're going to be talking about one of the greatest comebacks in NHL history if they make the playoffs from this point. Does this team strike you as a team capable of that?
1 point out of the wild card right now. You know?
Yeah, but that's after the hot streak, right? Like we talk about this all the time on the show, John. It's one thing to get hot.
I'm well aware.
Yeah. It's one thing to get hot to get to be in a position where you're close, but then you got to get hot again to actually get above the bar. So they've been pretty good. Listen, they're not red hot. They are still a losing hockey club. And so now they've got to continue to be hot for another fortnight or so to actually be above the playoff bar, and then they've got to continue to play hot after that to stay above the playoff bar. You think all that's possible still? I
do, and one of the reasons is they have not played really well at home, you've got to think at some point playing well at home will happen. The other part of it is that goaltending has finally become acceptable. Thatcher Demko's playing almost as well as Spencer Martin now. And I'm being a little bit facetious, but Demko's got to carry the weight. And that line of Mikheyev, Pettersson, and Kuzmenko is becoming a force to reckon with, and so it's taking a lot of pressure off the other guys. There's lots of positives to think about this hockey club right now.
Yeah, and the other thing is and noted in the welcome mat today, that bottom four of the West is really terrible. San Jose, Arizona, Chicago, and Anaheim. There will be a lot of free spaces on the bingo card
for everybody.
As you go for everybody. Absolutely. Well, two of them are in the Canucks division and two are in the other.
Comparable to last year in the East when you knew that you could get to Detroit and get to Buffalo and to get to Ottawa. And remember last year in the East, all 8 teams had 100 points to get to the playoffs. That's not going to happen in the East this year, but it's kind of flipped and gone the other way in the Western Conference this time.
As we look above the Vancouver Canucks, Calgary, Minnesota, St. Louis, Edmonton, and then all the way up to Seattle, who wins again last night, 5 in a row for the Kraken. Let's start with them. Do you think they're sustainable?
I don't see why not, and to me, it's as simple as they really have created a definition of team speed now, which with Bjorkstrand being added, Burakovsky being added, that's really helped them. Their defense is pretty solid, and really what's happened is that between Martin Jones and Philip Grubauer, Grubauer's played much better this year than he did at any point last year, so they're finally getting goaltending. And it's they got a new goaltending coach there. I think that's really helped them, and so I think it could be sustainable. I wouldn't rule it out. I love the way when I watched them play against Vegas the other night, and they were really impressive. They were diligent. They had some really strong pushback after Vegas scored a couple of goals. I do think it's sustainable, and I think that any of us, and I'm included, that took them for granted that they weren't going to be a playoff team this year. You have to have a second thought now.
Shane Wright, I think he's up to 4 goals in the AHL in 3 games. He's got a couple more that he's allowed to play on his conditioning stint. They're playing so well. Is this just going to march the 4th overall pick to the Canadian World Junior outfit?
I think so. We had Ron Francis on our show last week, and that's the first thing he said is that we're going to give him the 5 games in the American League, and then we'll see what happens with the World Junior camp, and then we'll make a decision if that's the case. But there's a lot. Ron Francis deserves. He's his stick-to-itiveness to his game plan. With pressure from ownership and management, hey, we've got to be better. Ron has just stayed the course. And last year, remember, he left Matty Beniers at Michigan and to play for the U.S. Olympic team. There's no reason to think that won't happen this time around with Wright going to the World Junior for Canada, and then, maybe he goes back to Kingston for the rest of the OHL season, just because they may not be in any hurry for him, and take their time. This is a guy as a player. Remember, he played in the NHL as an 18-year-old, and he knows the obstacles. And so I think there's a little bit of personal experience with Ron Francis saying, if we can be patient and let these guys grow, let's let them grow and be better pros when they're 19 or 20 years old as opposed to an 18-year-old.
The Canucks have had a bounty of offense this year. That's been a big reason why they've had this success even recently as well. And part of that has been Andrei Kuzmenko, who is one of the few people you'll find in the NHL this season who is a point per game with a healthy scratch. That's part of the learning process he's had to endure here, moving from the KHL to the NHL. When do the Canucks extend him? When do you think they do, or when do they trade him? Because they have to make a decision on that front. And if they're going to extend him, well, then that has a trickle effect, and they're going to have to create some trades as well, because they just can't put him with that new number into the lineup for next season. When do you think that gets attended to?
That, you know what? All of a sudden, success breeds success, but it also brings challenges. When you think that Kuzmenko's there, you know, are we forgetting about the Horvat situation already? With having to sign, now you have to sign 2 guys long term. They knew this was going to be an issue if Kuzmenko had success. 11 goals does create success for this guy. And so I would suspect that sometime, I think we're going to probably hear a little bit more around the All-Star break. Remember, they still have an All-Star break in this league. That there have to be discussions. You know as well as I do that Dan Milstein's a smart guy, and probably one of the most effective agents in the game right now. And he put Kuzmenko in a place to be successful. And in turn, he's gonna be able to turn this around. But I mean, they're not trading Kuzmenko. Are you crazy? That's not happening. He's the future, man. He's part of the future, long term.
Quinn Hughes finds himself on another stat pack with Bobby Orr, of all people. John, fewest games in a season to reach the 20 assists mark. It was 17 for the Canucks defenseman. That is better than anyone other than Robert Gordon in the 69-70 season. A word or two on the year he's having and what you see when you watch him out there.
Well, you know, I mean, I think you really notice him more when he's not playing. I mean, remember, he was out for the few of those games, and just the amount of confidence and control he has with the puck, particularly in the offensive zone. He's just, you know, he's one of those guys, you know, you worry about his size, and then all of a sudden he shoots the puck with such velocity. His smarts are beyond reproach. The Hughes dynasty, when you think of Jack and Quinn and Luke coming, and they say Luke could be better than both of the other two. I mean, what Quinn Hughes has done, and I still remember the day that Jim Benning drafted him, and everybody said he might be too small, but he might be too smart. And I think that his hockey smarts alone have allowed him to be successful. His vision on the ice is spectacular, and he's certainly a positive on that Canuck blue line that has received a ton of criticism this year, and perhaps that's going to go away as this team starts to win more games.
The only thing that might bring down the Vancouver Canucks in their hot streak right now is distraction, and they've got that now with an action from Rache Doerrie against the Vancouver Canucks. You know, what do you think that does to a front office when they are hit by something like this?
Well, I think they're bothered by it, but you know, it's one of those things that I think that they weren't surprised. Well, I don't think they're surprised with anything that happened in the weekend. They've seen that paperwork, and I think that I mean, Emily Castonguay is a lawyer by trade. I think she understands a lot of this stuff, and we're just going to have to wait for the courts to figure out what goes on in a civil suit. You know, it's too bad. It's disappointing. You know, I want to be politically correct here, but it does not help the cause of women to be involved in the game when this kind of thing happens either. That's you know, I mean, I think we all support having more women involved in the game. But when fingers are pointed from woman to woman, it doesn't. It allows a lot of people to push back and say, "Well, you see, that's why we can't have them," and that's not true. That's not fair. So let's let the courts figure it out, and hopefully Rachel is in a better spot when this is over, and hopefully the Canucks are in a good spot when this is over.
John, thank you for the time here today. Appreciate this. We'll catch up next Monday.
All right, boys. Have a good week. Don't plan the parade too quickly.
Nope. Not yet. But soon.